Welcome to Roaming with the Rylons, Australia and New Zealand. In this episode, we fly from Melbourne to Auckland and rent a camper van to explore the North Island of New Zealand. The first leg of our trip took us from Auckland to Wai-i-tapu. After a scenic drive of about 2.5 hours, we visited the glowworm caves. Unfortunately, they don't allow photography, so I can't show you the otherworldly blue lights on the ceilings of the cave over the subterranean river. You'll just have to trust me that it was well worth a visit. We settled in for a night at the Wai-i-tapu Top 10 Holiday Park and enjoyed dinner at the adjacent restaurant Hulu. The following day we were off to our next destination, Lake Taupo. Yes, I realize this doesn't sound anything like the name looks. I'm doing my best to pronounce these Maori words at least halfway decently. I apologize if I mangle them. At Lake Taupo, we took a cruise out to a cliff wall covered in carvings. The ride also provided snacks, free Wi-Fi, and a history lesson about the region. On our way out of the Taupo region, we stopped by Huka Falls. I expected to find a pretty waterfall to take a few pictures of, not realizing this place is more about sheer power than grace. The forces of nature are very apparent in the water slamming through the narrow gorge before gushing out into the lake on the other side. Our destination that night was Waikite Valley Thermal Pools. A reservation for an overnight campsite gets you free admission into their natural hot springs. The next morning we braved the fog to get to Geothermal Wonderland when they opened. If you had smell-o-vision right now, you would be blasted with the powerful rotten egg smell coming from all the sulfur in the air. Fortunately, this place looks a lot better than it smells. The colorful pools of bubbling mineral water were an awesome sight, only surpassed by the Lady Knox Geyser, a highlight of this park.
Keraro ke Kero to wai-i-tapu mai mai ai. Kia ora.
After watching the eruption, we kept on rolling, literally, with a Segway tour of Rotorua. If you've never ridden a Segway before, you're missing out. This was Mr. Rylon's first time on one, and you can see that after just a minute or two, he had the hang of it. So if you see one of these tours, I'd hop on.
And it releases hot steam. And if you see, there are bubbles towards the other side of the boat. Immediately, and this one and the smoke is white tinted over here. They started it has white.
Since our hands were full during our Segway tour, we circled back afterward to get some more photos of government gardens. Later that night, we had one final activity planned for this area. We took a redwoods tree walk. Bear with my footage here as it was difficult to capture the walkways strung 30 to 50 feet off the ground between the enormous trees, lit only by these gorgeous lanterns. While I would have loved to try the Redwoods Tree Walk again in the daylight, we had to leave early the next morning. That's because we had tickets for a tour of the Hobbiton movie set from the Lord of the Rings movies. These are my favorite books of all time. As an author and as a nerd, it was a must-see for me. Even if you aren't into the books or a fan of the movies, the set itself is essentially a well-maintained garden that's worth a visit.
Hide and seek with us. Either that or he may have gone for a morning.
That afternoon, we'd planned to take a helicopter ride over the coastal city of Tauranga and Mount Maunganui. The weather didn't cooperate. Instead, we found a place to have lunch and decide what to do next. Ultimately, we pushed ahead and traveled to our next destination, Hotwater Beach. Although the weather was still dreary the next morning, that didn't stop us from taking a glass-bottomed boat tour of Cathedral Cove and the surrounding coast.
So these guys are a wee bit expectant, and certainly not.
As we reached the final leg of our 2-week trek across Australia and New Zealand, we opted for more time relaxing and simply enjoying the beautiful environment. Or maybe we were just lazy those last couple of days. Either way, we ended up at one of my favorite stops on the entire trip. It's called the Lost Spring. It's a day spa created around the hot springs, lush landscaping, a gourmet restaurant, and massages. How can you go wrong with that? I'm gonna go in the cave. Swimming and taking a selfie video like a pro. From there we were headed back to Auckland, on a very twisty, very scenic coastal road. We scored a last-minute reservation at Takapuna. Not a bad way to spend your final few nights, parked directly by the beach just outside a major city. To make the most of our final few hours in Auckland, we opted for a small group tour. This one was special because it had a foodie focus. Mr. Rylon and I were the only people on the tour that day, and our guide Colleen made sure that this was a highlight of our trip. Our time had flown by, and just like that, we were on another plane, homeward bound. This video is a brief companion to the full Roaming with the Rylons Australia and New Zealand travel guide by Jayne Rylon. For more information, including cost, detailed itineraries, reviews, and Rylon recommendations, You can buy the guide in ebook or print at any of your favorite book retailers.